Clara May Sullivan's knees hit the frozen boardwalk outside Harker's General Store. 7 children, 7 hungry mouths waiting in a cabin 4 miles south. And she had nothing. Not a single grain of flour, not one bean. The door slammed behind her and Jedediah Harker's laughter followed her into the December wind. She pressed her fist against her mouth to hold back the sob. That's when she heard boots crunching through the snow. A shadow fell across her. A rough hand, gentle as morning, reached down. "Ma'am, get up. Your children ain't going hungry tonight." Stay until the end to see how one stranger's promise rebuilt 8 broken lives, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The bell above Harker's General Store jingled like a death knell. Clara May Sullivan stood just inside the doorway, her worn boots leaving wet marks on the wooden floor. Her fingers were blue. Her shawl was more whole than wool, but she kept her chin up, kept her spine straight, because dignity was the only thing she had left that didn't cost money. "Mrs. Sullivan." Jedediah Harker looked up from his ledger, his smile spreading slow and deliberate. "Back again so soon." "Mr. Harker." Clara approached the counter, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I need flour, cornmeal, whatever beans you can spare." "Need." Harker repeated the word like he was tasting it. He leaned forward on his elbows close enough that she could smell the tobacco on his breath. "That's a powerful word, need. What you got to trade for all this needing?" "I'll have money come spring. The territorial office. The territorial office." Harker laughed, and it wasn't kind. "You've been singing that song for 6 months, Clara. Your husband's claim lapsed, his pension dried up, and last I checked, dead men don't send wages home." The words hit like fists. Clara's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. "I have 7 children, Mr. Harker. The youngest is 3 years old. The oldest is 13, and she's been eating half portions so her brothers and sisters can have more." Clara's voice cracked, but she pushed through. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for credit. I'll work it off. I'll clean. I'll mend. I'll do whatever needs doing." Harker's eyes traveled down her body, slow and appraising. Clara's skin crawled, but she stood still. "Whatever needs doing," he repeated softly. "Now, that's an interesting offer." "I mean honest work." "I know what you mean." Harker straightened his expression, shifting to something almost friendly. "Almost. Here's the thing, Clara. I'm a businessman. I can't just hand out goods to every widow who comes through that door with a sad story. You understand? I understand you've given credit to every rancher in this valley. Ranchers got collateral, land, cattle. What you got?" Clara's hands curled into fists inside her threadbare gloves. "I've got 40 acres. Unproved land that'll revert to the government come spring." Harker shook his head. "That ain't collateral. That's wishful thinking." Behind Clara, the door opened. Cold wind rushed in carrying snowflakes and the sound of boots. She didn't turn around. She couldn't afford to lose focus. "Please." The word tasted like ash. "Mr. Harker, I'm begging you. My children haven't had a real meal in 3 days. Thomas caught a rabbit yesterday, but split 7 ways." 8 ways, Harker corrected. "Don't forget yourself, though from the look of you, maybe you have been." Heat flooded Clara's face. Shame and rage tangled together until she couldn't tell them apart. "You know," Harker said, leaning back, "there might be a way. You're still a young woman, not bad looking when you clean up. A widow with 7 children needs a man to provide. I've been thinking about taking another wife myself. My boys need a mother and you, no." "Now, Clara?" "I said no." Clara's voice rang out sharper than she intended. "I'd rather starve than sell myself for a bag of flour." Harker's friendly mask dropped. His eyes went cold and hard as the winter outside. "Then starve." He slammed his ledger shut. "Get out of my store, Mrs. Sullivan, and don't come back until you've got money or sense, whichever comes first." Clara stood frozen. She thought about Sarah at home trying to make soup from boiled snow and old bones. She thought about little Hannah who'd stopped asking for food because she'd learned there was no point. She thought about Thomas, 11 years old, and carrying guilt for being unable to provide like his dead father. "Please." I said get out. Harker pointed at the door. "You're blocking my entrance and driving away paying customers." Clara turned. 3 women stood near the fabric bolts, watching with the hungry fascination of spectators at a hanging. She recognized them all. Had sat beside them in church when Ezra was alive. Had brought them bread when their children were sick. None of them met her eyes. Clara walked toward the door, her boots heavy as stones. The women parted to let her pass, their skirts rustling away from her like she was diseased. "Poor thing," one of them murmured. 7 children and no man. What did she expect? "Should have taken Harker's offer," another whispered back. "Pride's a luxury she can't afford." Clara pushed through the door and into the bitter cold. The wind hit her like a wall. December in Montana Territory didn't play games, it killed. Clara had seen it happen. Seen men freeze solid between barn and house. Seen women lose fingers to frostbite. Seen children buried in snowdrifts until spring thaw revealed their small bodies. 7 children. 4 miles through this. She took 3 steps and her knees buckled. Clara caught herself on the hitching post, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She couldn't cry. If she cried, the tears would freeze on her face. If she cried, she might not stop. "Ma'am?" The voice came from somewhere to her left. Deep, quiet. The kind of voice that didn't need to shout to be heard. Clara didn't look up. Couldn't look up. "I'm fine." "No, ma'am, you ain't." Boots appeared in her line of vision. Worn leather, well kept despite the weather. A man's boots, large and solid. They stopped in front of her and didn't move. "Look at me." Something in the voice, not a command exactly, but not a request either, made Clara lift her head. The man was tall. Taller than her husband had been, with shoulders that filled out his canvas coat like they'd been built for carrying weight. His face was weathered, angular, half hidden beneath a dark hat crusted with snow, but his eyes were something else. Blue as a summer sky, pale and clear and steady. He wasn't looking at her with pity. Wasn't looking at her with the contempt the townspeople showed. He was looking at her like she was a person, like she mattered. "That man in there," the stranger said. "He turn you away?" Clara's throat closed up. She nodded once. "You got children at home, hungry ones?" Another nod. The stranger's jaw tightened. Something dark flashed across his face and was gone. "How many?" 7. The word came out broken. 4 girls and 3 boys. The youngest is 3, the oldest is 13, and she's... Clara stopped pressing her hand against her mouth. "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this. I'll figure something out. I always do." "Do you?" The question wasn't cruel. It was honest, and that was worse. "I have to." Clara straightened, forcing steel into her spine. "They're my children. I don't have a choice." The stranger studied her for a long moment. His eyes moved over her face, reading something there that Clara couldn't name. Then he turned and looked at Harker's store. Through the window, she could see the shopkeeper watching them, his expression sour and suspicious. "That man," the stranger said slowly. "He the only store in town. The only one that sells food in quantities. There's a trading post 4 miles east, but I can't..." Clara stopped herself. "It doesn't matter. I don't have money anyway." "What's your name?" "Clara. Clara Sullivan." "Mrs. Sullivan." The stranger touched the brim of his hat. "Name's Silas Callahan. Most folks call me Cal." "Mr. Callahan." Clara pulled her shawl tighter, preparing to leave. "I appreciate your concern, but there's nothing you can do. I need to get home before..." "I got a wagon." Silas interrupted. "I got supplies. More than I need for one man traveling alone. And I know that trading post you mentioned, Jensen's place. He don't ask questions, and he don't judge." Clara stared at him. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. I don't understand. It's simple. Silas stepped closer, his voice dropping. You come with me to Jensen's. I got pelts to trade, and what I get for them goes to feeding your children. Tonight. Before this storm gets worse. You don't even know me. I know enough. His jaw set hard. I know you got 7 children who didn't ask to be born into this world and didn't ask to go hungry. I know that man in there would rather let them starve than show a scrap of human decency. And I know. He stopped, something shifting in his expression. I know what it's like to be turned away when you got nothing left. Clara's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. Not here. Not where Harker could see through his window and enjoy her humiliation. Why? She whispered. Why would you help a stranger? Silas was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, softer, older, carrying the weight of years. Because I had a mama once who stood where you're standing, desperate, alone, and a man helped her when nobody else would. Didn't ask for nothing in return. Just saw a problem and fixed it because it was the right thing to do. He met her eyes. I figure if I can do the same, I ought to. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Every warning she'd ever heard screamed in her skull. He was a stranger. A drifter. She had no idea what he really wanted, and experience had taught her that men always wanted something. But louder than the warnings was the memory of Hannah this morning. Little Hannah, 3 years old, looking up with big eyes and saying, Mama, my tummy hurts, and Clara having nothing to give her except lies and empty promises. I can't pay you back. Didn't ask for payment. Then what do you want? Silas's expression didn't change. I want to sleep tonight knowing 7 children got food in their bellies, that's all. That's enough. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was everything Clara had been raised not to do. She looked back at Harker's store. Through the window she could see him still watching, his face twisted with something like jealousy. The women had gathered near the glass, pointing and whispering. Let them whisper. Clara turned back to Silas Callahan, this stranger with the steady eyes and the worn boots, and the voice like gravel and grace. All right, she said. I'll come with you. So, the wagon was old but solid, the canvas patched but clean. 2 horses stood in the trace's roans with kind eyes and thick winter coats. Silas helped Clara up onto the bench, his hand strong and careful, and she felt the calluses through her thin gloves. He climbed up beside her, took the reins and clicked his tongue. The horses leaned forward and the wagon creaked into motion. They rolled past Harker's store. Clara kept her eyes forward, but she felt the stares like hot brands against her skin. They're going to talk, she said quietly. Let them. You don't understand. In a town like this, reputation is everything. If people think if they assume that you and I... Do you care what they think? Clara considered the question seriously. A week ago she might have said yes. A month ago she would have been terrified of gossip. But that was before her children started going to bed hungry. Before she learned exactly how much Christian charity was worth in Bitter Creek, Montana. I used to, she admitted. Now I just care about keeping my children alive. Silas nodded like this was the answer he expected. Then don't worry about the talk. Worry about getting home with food. They left the town behind, following a trail that wound east through the valley. The snow was falling harder now, thick flakes that coated the horses' manes and gathered in the folds of Clara's shawl. The world turned white and quiet, muffled by winter. 7 children, Silas said after a while. That's a lot of mouths to feed on your own. It is. Their father. Clara's chest tightened. Ezra. He died 2 years ago. Cave-in at the Morrison mine. They sent his body back and told me I was entitled to a widow's pension. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. The pension lasted 18 months. Then the territorial office found a technicality. Said the claim wasn't filed proper. Said I wasn't owed anything after all. Silas's hands tightened on the reins. That's wrong. A lot of things are wrong, Mr. Callahan. Doesn't make them less true. Cal? He said. Just Cal. Cal, then. Clara pulled her shawl closer. What about you? You said your mother was in my position once. What happened to her? She survived. Remarried when I was 14. Man didn't want another man's children underfoot, so I left. Been drifting ever since. 30-some years of drifting. 24. I'm 38. He glanced at her. Old enough to know better about most things. And young enough to still make mistakes. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Something like that. They rode in silence for a while. The trail climbed a gentle rise, and when they crested it, Clara could see a building in the distance, a squat log structure with smoke rising from its chimney. Jensen's? She asked. That's it. How do you know him? I don't really. Stopped there once years back passing through. He struck me as fair. Man who judges a person by their word, not their circumstances. Clara absorbed this. And the pelts you mentioned? Trapped them myself. 3 beaver, 2 mink, a wolf. Silas shifted on the bench. Should be enough to get you supplies for a month, maybe more if Jensen's feeling generous. A month? Clara's voice caught. Cal, I can't. You can. His tone left no room for argument. Your children need food. I have means to provide it. Everything else is just pride talking, and pride don't fill empty stomachs. Clara fell silent, overwhelmed. She'd been alone so long carrying everything herself. The weight of it had become so familiar, she'd forgotten it was heavy. Now here was this stranger lifting part of that burden like it was nothing, and she didn't know what to do with the feeling. Thank you, she whispered. I don't have words for, don't need words, don't need thanks. Just need you to take care of those children. They pulled up to Jensen's trading post, and Silas set the brake. Wait here, I'll bring him out. He disappeared inside, and Clara sat alone in the falling snow, her heart pounding. This was real. This was happening. A stranger was about to spend his winter's earnings on food for her children. The door opened. Silas emerged with a small wiry man whose beard looked like it housed several birds. Jensen's sharp eyes found Clara immediately. This the widow? He asked. This is Mrs. Sullivan. Jensen walked to the wagon. Studied Clara with an appraising look that somehow wasn't unkind. 7 children, he says. That true? Yes, sir. And that weasel Harker turned you away. Clara's face burned. Yes, sir. Jensen spat tobacco juice into the snow. Harker's a snake, always has been. Wouldn't piss on that man if he was on fire. He looked at Silas. You vouching for her? I am. Good enough for me. Jensen waved toward the building. Come inside, Mrs. Sullivan. Let's see what we can do about them hungry children. An hour later, Clara stood beside a wagon loaded with more food than she'd seen in 6 months. Flour, cornmeal, beans, salt pork, coffee, molasses, sugar, dried apples, a small wheel of cheese, 2 blankets thick wool without holes, a sack of potatoes that Jensen had thrown in on principle. This is too much, Clara said for the 5th time. This is enough, Silas corrected. Maybe. The pelts weren't worth all this. Jensen grinned his gap-toothed grin. The pelts were worth more. Your man there's got an eye for quality. That wolf hide alone would fetch $20 in Helena. He clapped Silas on the shoulder. You ever need work, Callahan, you come see me. I could use a trapper who knows his business. Silas nodded. I'll keep that in mind. They said their goodbyes and set out for Clara's cabin. The sun was sinking toward the mountains, now painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. The storm had lessened, leaving the world hushed and crystalline. 4 miles south, Clara said, along Bitter Creek. Silas turned the wagon onto the trail. Tell me about them. Your children. And Clara did. The words came easier than she expected, easier than they'd come in years. She told him about Sarah, 13, and Sirius carrying too much responsibility on her young shoulders. About Thomas, 11, and angry at a father who'd left by dying, trying so hard to be the man of the house when he was still just a boy. About Abigail, 10, and wild, who'd rather be outside than in, and Samuel, 8, and gentle, who drew pictures in the dirt with sticks. She told him about Mary Grace, 6, and fragile, who talked to her dead father when she thought no one was listening. About Benjamin, 5, and fearless, who climbed everything and fell off most of it. About Hannah, 3, and sweet, the baby who'd never really known her father at all. "They're good children," Clara finished. "Better than I deserve, probably. They don't complain even when they're hungry. They take care of each other. Sarah especially, she's been more mother to the little ones than I have some days." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You've done well by them. I've kept them alive. Some days that's all I can say. That's everything." His voice was rough. "Don't let anyone tell you different." The cabin came into view as the last light faded. It was small, too small for 9 people, and listing slightly to one side. The chimney leaked smoke from a crack, and the windows were stuffed with rags. But there was light inside, warm and yellow, and Clara's heart lifted at the sight. "Mama!" The door flew open, and children poured out. 7 of them, ranging from tall to tiny, all thin, all wide-eyed, all staring at the wagon like it was a vision from heaven. Sarah reached Clara first, helping her down from the bench with hands that shook. "Mama, what is that food?" "Yes, sweetheart." Clara pulled her eldest close. "It's food." Thomas pushed forward, positioning himself between his family and the stranger. 11 years old and already wearing his dead father's suspicious eyes. "Who's he?" "My name's Silas Callahan." Cal climbed down from the wagon, moving slowly, keeping his hands visible. "I'm a friend." "We don't have friends." "Thomas." Clara's voice held warning. "It's all right," Silas said. "Boy's protecting his family. That's as it should be." He met Thomas's glare without flinching. "Your mama needed help getting supplies. I provided transport and trade goods. That's all." "Nobody helps us for nothing." "Then I reckon I'm nobody." Silas turned to the wagon and began unloading. "Sarah, is it? You want to show me where the kitchen stores go?" Sarah looked at her mother. Clara nodded. After a moment, Sarah stepped forward, still cautious. "This way." They unloaded the wagon as darkness fell. The children carried bundles inside each one, exclaiming over the contents. Mary Grace clutched the molasses tin like it was made of gold. Benjamin and Samuel fought over who got to carry the cheese. Hannah sat on the porch, too small to help, watching everything with wondering eyes. "Mama," she called out, "is this Christmas?" Clara's eyes burned. "No, baby, it's not Christmas." "But we have food." "Yes, we have food." "Then it's better than Christmas." Silas paused in his unloading, something shifting in his expression. He looked at Clara, and she saw her own heartbreak reflected in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I'd like to stay, just for tonight. Help set up. Make sure you're squared away before I move on." Thomas bristled. "We don't need—" "Yes," Clara interrupted. She met her son's angry gaze. "Yes, you may stay. Thomas helped Mr. Callahan with the horses." Thomas opened his mouth to argue, then shut it. He stalked toward the horses, his spine rigid with resentment. "He'll come around," Clara said. "He shouldn't have to." Silas's voice was gentle. "He's been carrying a man's weight on a boy's shoulders. That don't leave room for trusting strangers. You see a lot. I've been that boy. Different time, different place, same weight." Clara led him inside, and the warmth of the cabin enveloped them. It was cramped and worn, and holding together through sheer stubbornness. But it was home. 7 children squeezed around a table meant for 4, their faces bright with anticipation. "Can we eat now, Mama?" Samuel asked. Please. Clara looked at the supplies stacked on the counter, looked at her children thin and hopeful. Looked at the stranger who'd made this possible. Yes, she said. We can eat. And for the first time in months, Clara May Sullivan let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, things might be okay. Silas cooked. Clara hadn't expected that. She'd started toward the stove herself, but he'd waved her off with surprising authority. Sit. You've been walking and worrying all day. Let me handle this. You can cook. Been feeding myself for 24 years. Picked up a few things. He pulled flour and salt pork from the supplies, moving with easy efficiency. Ain't fancy, but it'll fill bellies. That good enough? It was more than good enough. Clara sat at the table surrounded by her children and watched this stranger navigate her cramped kitchen like he belonged there. He made biscuits first, mixing dough with practiced hands, while the children gathered around to watch. Can I help? Abigail asked, her tomboy curiosity overcoming her caution. You know how to grease a pan? Yes, sir. Then grease this one. Not too much, just enough it don't stick. Abigail attacked the task with enthusiasm. Silas moved on to the salt pork, slicing it thin and setting it to fry. The smell that filled the cabin was enough to make Clara's mouth water. I want to help too, Samuel said quietly. You got a good eye. I guess so. Then watch them biscuits. They brown on top, you tell me right away. Can you do that? Samuel nodded solemnly, taking his position by the stove like a guard at his post. Mary Grace crept closer, her thumb in her mouth. She'd been the most frightened of the stranger, hiding behind Sarah's skirt since he arrived. But now she watched him with cautious fascination. What's your name, little one? Silas asked, not looking at her directly, keeping his voice soft. Mary Grace. That's a pretty name. You know what Mary means? She shook her head. Means wished for child. Someone who was wanted real bad. Silas flipped the salt pork, still not looking at her. I reckon your mama wanted you something fierce. Mary Grace looked at Clara, then back at Silas. She did. Course she did. Look at you. Pretty as a picture. Who wouldn't want a daughter like that? Something in Mary Grace's rigid little body relaxed. She didn't come closer, but she stopped hiding. Clara watched this quiet magic, this stranger charming her children one by one, and felt something crack open in her chest. Something that had been frozen solid for 2 years. Biscuits are browning, Samuel announced. Good eye. Silas pulled them from the oven, golden and perfect. Sarah, you want to slice up some of that cheese. Not too thick, make it stretch. Sarah hesitated only a moment before obeying. Soon she was moving around the kitchen beside Silas, the two of them working together, like they'd done it 100 times. Only Thomas held back. He sat in the corner, arms crossed, watching everything with suspicious eyes. Clara wanted to go to him to explain, but she knew better. Thomas needed time. He'd lost his father, and any man who threatened to take that sacred place would be met with resistance. Supper's ready, Silas announced. They gathered around the table, 8 people packed into a space meant for half that. Silas ladled out beans with chunks of salt pork, set the plate of biscuits in the center, arranged the cheese slices where everyone could reach. It wasn't a feast by any standard, but to Clara's children, it might as well have been. Can we eat? Benjamin bounced in his seat. Please, please, please. Clara looked at Silas. He looked back at her. Your house, he said. Your call. Eat, Clara said, and it was like releasing hounds. The children fell on the food with a desperation that hurt to watch. They stuffed biscuits in their mouths, shoveled beans, grabbed cheese with both hands. Only Sarah and Thomas maintained any dignity, eating quickly but neatly. Slow down, Clara said automatically. You'll make yourselves sick. Can't help it, Samuel mumbled around a mouthful. Too good. Silas ate slowly, watching the children with an expression Clara couldn't read. When Hannah struggled to hold her spoon, he quietly reached over and cut her biscuit into smaller pieces, then went back to his own meal without comment. "Thank you," Clara whispered. "She's little. Little ones need help." Thomas's fork clattered against his plate. "We don't need your help." Silas looked at him steadily. "Maybe not, but your sister does. You going to let pride keep her hungry?" Thomas's face reddened. He opened his mouth closed, it looked away. "Being a man ain't about refusing help." Silas continued, his voice gentle. "It's about knowing when to accept it. When your family needs something you can't provide alone. Swallowing pride is the strongest thing you can do." "What do you know about it?" "I know I've been where you are. 11 years old, pa dead, thinking I had to carry everything myself." Silas set down his fork. "Nearly broke me trying. Took years to learn that strong ain't the same as alone." Thomas said nothing. But some of the hostility in his posture eased. The meal continued in softer silence. When the last biscuit was gone and the bean pot scraped clean, the children sat back with the dazed contentment of full bellies. "That was the best food ever," Benjamin announced. "It was adequate," Sarah said, then ruined her dignity by adding, "May I have the recipe for the biscuits?" Silas smiled. "Ain't much of a recipe. Flour, salt, lard, buttermilk. I'll show you tomorrow if—" He stopped, glancing at Clara. "If that's all right." "Tomorrow." The word hung in the air. "You're staying?" Abigail asked hopefully. "I was planning to camp down by the creek, just to make sure you all got settled proper. But if your mama would rather I move on—" "Stay." The word came from Thomas. Everyone turned to stare at him. His face was red, but his chin was up. "The cabin leaks. The roof's got holes. I've been trying to fix it, but—" He looked down. "We need help." Clara's heart cracked and mended all at once. Her boy, her proud, angry boy, admitting what it cost him to admit. "If you're willing," she said to Silas, "we'd be grateful for the help." "I'm willing." He looked around at the faces ringing the table, suspicious and hopeful and cautious and eager, and something in his expression shifted. "I'm willing." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin's patchwork walls. Snow whispered against the windows. The fire crackled and popped. And Clara May Sullivan, surrounded by her children, and a stranger who'd appeared from nowhere, felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope. The morning arrived gray and bitter, but Clara woke to something she hadn't heard in months. Chopping. She sat up in the dark, her heart hammering. The children were still asleep, tangled together on the rope bed and pallets, their breathing soft and even. But outside, rhythmic and steady, came the sound of an axe biting wood. Clara wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and crept to the door. When she opened it, cold air rushed in, carrying snowflakes and the scent of pine. Silas Callahan stood in the gray pre-dawn light. His coat hung on a fence post, working in just his shirt despite the cold. He'd found her pathetic woodpile, little more than scraps and half-rotted branches, and was splitting logs he must have dragged from somewhere down by the creek. The axe rose and fell with the precision of long practice, and already a neat stack was growing beside the cabin. He looked up when he heard the door. Lowered the axe. "Morning." "You came back." The words came out before Clara could stop them. "Said I would." People say a lot of things. Something flickered in his eyes. Understanding maybe, or recognition of a wound he knew too well. "I ain't people," he said simply. "I'm me, and when I give my word I keep it." Clara stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, watching this stranger who kept showing up when he said he would. The concept felt foreign, dangerous even. "I'll make coffee," she managed. "I'd appreciate that." She went back inside and built up the fire with hands that trembled slightly. Not from cold, from something else entirely. By the time the coffee was ready and the children were stirring, Silas had split enough wood to last a week. He stacked it against the cabin wall, where it would stay dry, then came inside, stomping snow from his boots. "Something smells good," he said. "Just coffee, and I'm heating leftover biscuits from last night." "That's more than good. That's perfect." The children emerged one by one, rubbing sleep from their eyes. Hannah came first, toddling over to Silas without hesitation and holding up her arms. "Up!" she demanded. Clara started to apologize, but Silas was already lifting the little girl, settling her on his hip like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Morning, little one. You sleep good." "My tummy doesn't hurt anymore." Something crossed Silas's face. Pain quickly hidden. "Good. That's real good." Sarah appeared next, her expression guarded, as she took in the scene, her baby sister in a stranger's arms, her mother standing at the stove looking almost peaceful. "I can take her," Sarah said, reaching for Hannah. "She's fine." Clara's voice was gentle but firm. "Come eat, Sarah. There's food." The word food still carried magic. Sarah's resistance crumbled, and she moved toward the table where biscuits and coffee waited. Thomas came down from the loft, his eyes finding Silas immediately. The hostility from last night had faded, but wariness remained. "You stayed," he said. "Told you I would." "Most people lie." "I ain't most people." Silas set Hannah down carefully. "Your mama said the roof leaks. You want to show me where—" Thomas hesitated. Clara held her breath. "I've been trying to fix it," Thomas said finally. "But I don't got the right materials, or the know-how, really." "Well, I got both. So how about you show me the problems, and we figure out solutions together?" The word "together" hung in the air. Thomas's jaw worked, pride and need warring on his young face. "Fine," he said at last. "After breakfast." It was a small victory, but Clara felt it like a sunrise. They ate quickly warm biscuits with molasses coffee for the adults, warm water with a splash of molasses for the children. When the meal was done, Silas pushed back from the table. "All right, Thomas. Let's see what we're working with." The two of them climbed up to examine the roof, while Clara set the other children to their chores. Sarah took the younger ones outside to check on the animals, one scraggly cow and 3 chickens that had somehow survived the winter so far. Abigail hauled water from the well, complaining cheerfully the whole way. Clara found herself standing at the window watching Silas and Thomas on the roof. She could hear their voices, though not their words. Silas's low rumble, Thomas's higher responses. At one point, Silas laughed and Clara saw her son's shoulders relax just slightly. "He's good with children." Clara turned. Sarah stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "He seems to be." "Papa was good with children too." Sarah's voice was careful, neutral. "Remember, he used to carry Benjamin on his shoulders everywhere." "I remember." "I don't want to forget him, Mama. I don't want someone else to make us forget." Clara crossed to her daughter and took her hands. They were rough. These hands rougher than a 13-year-old's should be. Too much work. Too much responsibility. "No one could ever replace your father," Clara said quietly. "And no one is trying to. Mr. Callahan is helping us through a hard time. That's all." "Is it?" "Yes." Sarah studied her mother's face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her because she nodded slowly. "All right. I'll trust you, Mama. But if he hurts you, if he hurts any of us, he won't." "You don't know that." "No," Clara admitted. "I don't. But I'm choosing to believe it. Sometimes that's all we can do." Sarah squeezed her hands once, then released them. "I need to go help Abigail. She's probably fallen in the well by now." Clara laughed, actually laughed, and the sound surprised them both. "Go on then. I'll start on the mending." The morning passed in productive rhythm. Silas and Thomas worked on the roof, their occasional conversation drifting down through the gaps. Clara mended clothes and kept the fire going. The younger children played in the snow, their laughter carrying on the cold air. It felt almost normal, almost like a family. Around midday, Silas climbed down and approached Clara, where she sat on the porch, needle in hand. "Roof's patched," he said. "Not perfect, but it'll hold through winter. Thomas did good work, he just needed the right materials." "Thank you for including him. He's a good kid, smart, capable. Just needs someone to show him he don't have to carry everything alone." Clara's needle stilled. "You keep saying that. About carrying things alone." "Because I know what it does to a person." Silas sat down on the porch step, keeping a respectful distance. "I was Thomas's age when my pa died. Spent the next 5 years trying to be the man of the house. Nearly killed me. What changed? I left." His voice was matter-of-fact, but Clara heard the pain underneath. "My ma remarried, and her new husband made it clear I wasn't welcome. So I walked out. 14 years old, nothing but the clothes on my back and a chip on my shoulder the size of Montana." That must have been terrifying. It was freedom. He looked at her, his blue eyes steady. Terrible, lonely freedom, but freedom nonetheless. Clara set down her mending. "How did you survive?" "Work, wherever I could find it. Ranches mostly. I'm good with horses, always have been. Worked my way across Texas, New Mexico, Colorado. Eventually ended up riding with the Rangers for a while." "You were a lawman." "For 5 years. Then I wasn't." Something in his tone warned Clara not to push. She filed the information away for later. "And now you drift," she said instead. "And now I drift." He picked up a stick and turned it in his hands. "Or I did. Starting to think maybe I've drifted far enough." The words settled between them, heavy with implication. Clara's heart beat faster. "What do you mean?" Before Silas could answer, Abigail came running around the corner of the cabin, her face bright with alarm. "Mama, someone's coming! Riders on the road!" Clara stood quickly, her pulse spiking. Visitors were rare, and rarely good news. Silas was on his feet too, his hand dropping to the knife at his belt. "How many?" he asked. "3, no 4. Abigail squinted toward the trail. "It's Mr. Harker, Mama. I recognize his horse." Clara's stomach dropped. She looked at Silas and saw her own concern reflected in his eyes. "Get the children inside," he said quietly. "Silas?" "Inside, Clara. Let me handle this." She wanted to argue, but there was no time. The riders were already visible, 4 figures on horseback cresting the rise. Clara gathered her children, Sarah helping with the little ones, Thomas's face pale but determined, and herded them into the cabin. "Stay away from the windows," she ordered. "Sarah, keep the young ones calm. Thomas, watch the back door." "I should be out there," Thomas protested. "You should be protecting your sisters. That's what a man does." Thomas's jaw tightened, but he moved to his post. Clara positioned herself at the window, peering through the gap in the rags. Outside, Silas stood alone in the yard, his posture relaxed but ready. The riders pulled up 20 feet away. Jedediah Harker sat his horse like a man who owned the world. Beside him were his 2 sons, Vernon, 19, and mean as a snake, and Wesley, 17, and nervous. The 4th rider was Frank Murdoch, Harker's foreman, a man known more for his fists than his brain. "Mr. Callahan," Harker said, his voice carrying on the cold air. "Interesting finding you here." "Mr. Harker?" Silas's tone was polite neutral. "Something I can help you with. Just checking on the widow Sullivan, making sure she's all right." "She's fine." "Is she?" Harker leaned forward in his saddle. "Because word in town is you've been staying out here, spending nights, working on her property." His smile was sharp as broken glass. "Makes a man wonder what exactly you're working on." Vernon snickered. Wesley looked uncomfortable. "I've been helping with repairs," Silas said calmly. "Roof was leaking. Wood needed splitting. Work that needs doing." And who asked you to do it? Nobody had to ask. I saw a need and filled it. How charitable. Harker's voice dripped with false admiration. A drifter with no name, no history, no references, just showing up to help a widow with 7 children, out of the goodness of his heart. Something wrong with goodness. There's something wrong with a man who don't explain himself. Harker's mask of civility slipped slightly. What do you want, Callahan Moneyland? The widow herself. Silas went very still. When he spoke, his voice had dropped to something low and dangerous. I want those children to have food in their bellies and a roof that don't leak. I want their mama to sleep at night without worrying about them freezing to death. I want them to survive this winter, which is more than your Christian charity was willing to provide. Harker's face flushed. Now see here? No, you see here. Silas took a step forward, and all 4 horses shifted nervously. I was in your store yesterday. I watched you turn away a desperate woman with 7 hungry children. I watched you humiliate her in front of your customers. I watched you offer her marriage like it was a business transaction. That's none of your concern. I made it my concern. Vernon's hand dropped toward his gun. Silas didn't move, but something in his stance changed, a subtle shift that Clara recognized from watching predators in the wild. Tell your boy to move his hand, Silas said softly, before I move it for him. The air went tight and dangerous. Harker's eyes darted between Silas and Vernon, calculating. Vernon, hands on the saddle horn. But, Pa? Now. Vernon obeyed, his face twisting with resentment. Silas relaxed slightly, but only slightly. Here's how this is going to go, Harker said, his voice controlled. I'm going to ride back to town and ask some questions about you, Mr. Callahan. I'm going to find out where you came from and what you've done. And if I don't like the answers, I'm going to make sure every door in this territory closes to you. Ask whatever you want. I got nothing to hide. Everyone's got something to hide. Harker gathered his reins. You remember that drifter. And you remember that I was here first. The widow Sullivan is my responsibility, not yours. The widow Sullivan belongs to herself, and her children belong to her. You might want to remember that. For a moment, Clara thought Harker might order his men to act. The tension was thick enough to cut, but then Harker laughed a cold, empty sound and turned his horse. We'll see, he said. We'll see. The 4 riders departed their horses, kicking up snow as they went. Silas stood motionless until they disappeared over the rise. Then his shoulders dropped, and Clara saw his hand tremble slightly as he reached up to remove his hat. She pushed through the door and crossed to him. Silas. I'm all right. You're shaking. Yeah. He took a breath, let it out slowly. I don't like conflict. Never have. But I like watching bullies even less. He'll make trouble now. He was always going to make trouble. Man like that can't stand seeing someone else get what he thinks is his. Silas looked at her, his blue eyes serious. I'm sorry if I made things worse. You didn't. You made them clearer. Clara touched his arm just briefly. Come inside. There's coffee. They went in together, and the children swarmed around Silas, all talking at once. We saw through the window. You scared them. Were you going to fight children? Clara's voice cut through the chaos. Give Mr. Callahan some room. He's had enough excitement for one morning. But Silas crouched down to their level, his face softening. I wasn't going to fight if I could help it. Fighting's a last resort, not a first choice. You remember that. But you could have fought them, Thomas said. It wasn't quite admiration in his voice, but it was close. You could have taken all 4. Maybe. Maybe not. But winning a fight ain't the same as winning. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand your ground without throwing a punch. Thomas considered this, his brow furrowed. I want you to teach me, he said abruptly. How to do that. How to stand like you did. How to make people back down without fighting. Silas glanced at Clara. She nodded. All right, he said. But it ain't just about standing. It's about knowing yourself. Knowing what you will and won't do. Knowing where your lines are. He stood groaning slightly. We'll start tomorrow. Right now I need that coffee your mama mentioned." The rest of the day passed quietly. Silas worked on patching gaps in the cabin walls while Clara did laundry and the children helped where they could. There was no more talk of Harker, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. That evening after supper, beans and cornbread and the last of the cheese, the children settled around the fire. Sarah read aloud from the family Bible, her voice clear and steady. The younger ones listened with varying degrees of attention, while Thomas sat apart whittling at a piece of wood. Silas watched Sarah read his expression unreadable. "You're educated," he said when she paused to turn a page. "Mama was a school teacher before she married Papa. She taught all of us. That's valuable, more valuable than people know." "Can you read Mr. Callahan?" The question was innocent, but Silas's face tightened. "Not much. My name a few words here and there. Never had the chance to learn proper." Clara looked up from her mending. "I could teach you." The words were out before she considered them. Silas's eyes met hers across the room. "You'd do that." "I taught school for 6 years. I taught all 7 of my children. One more student wouldn't be trouble." "I'm 38 years old. So learning doesn't have an age limit." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Clara saw something working behind his eyes, pride warring with desire, old shame wrestling with new hope. "I'd like that," he said finally. "If you really don't mind." "I really don't mind." Sarah looked between them with an expression too knowing for 13. But she said nothing, just went back to reading. Later, after the children were asleep, Silas prepared to leave for his camp by the creek. "You could stay inside," Clara said. "It's cold tonight." "Too cold, and too many eyes watching." He pulled on his coat, checking that his knife was secure. "Harker's men might be patrolling. If anyone sees me here at night." "I don't care what they see." "I know. But your children might someday. I won't be the reason they carry that burden." Clara wanted to argue, but she understood. In a place like Bitter Creek, reputation was everything. And hers was already precarious. "Be careful," she said instead. "Always am." He paused at the door, his hand on the latch. Without looking at her, he said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For offering to teach me. For trusting me with your children. For—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "For treating me like I'm worth something." Clara crossed to him, reached up, touched his face. His skin was rough cold from the cabin's chill, but his eyes when they met hers were warm. "You are worth something," she said quietly. "You're worth more than you know." He caught her hand, held it against his cheek for just a moment. Then he released it and stepped out into the night. Clara stood at the door, watching until his figure disappeared into the darkness. Then she closed it, barred it, and went to bed. But sleep was long in coming. She lay in the dark, listening to her children breathe, thinking about a man with sad eyes and gentle hands who kept showing up when he said he would. And for the first time in 2 years, she let herself imagine a future that included someone other than herself and her children. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was hope. The reading lessons began the next evening. They sat at the table after the children were settled, a single candle casting warm light across the worn surface. Clara had her mother's old primer, the same one she'd used to teach all 7 of her children, and she set it between them like an offering. "We'll start with letters," she said. "The alphabet. Do you know any of them?" "Some. Silas." He smiled slightly. "Enough to write my name barely." "That's a good start. We'll build from there." She began with A, drawing the letter carefully on a piece of slate they'd saved for the children's lessons. Silas watched intently, his brow furrowed with concentration. When she handed him the chalk, his large hand nearly engulfed it. "Try," she encouraged. His first attempt was shaky, childlike. He stared at it with something close to disgust. "I'm too old for this." "You're never too old to learn. Try again." He tried again. Better this time, though, still uncertain. Good, Clara said. Now B. They worked through the alphabet slowly, letter by letter. Silas's frustration was evident, his jaw tight, his shoulders tense, but he didn't quit. When they reached Z, his slate was covered with crooked letters and his hand was cramped. Enough for tonight, Clara said gently. I barely learned anything. You learned 26 letters. That's more than you knew this morning. Silas set down the chalk and flexed his fingers. How did you do it? Teach all 7 of them without losing your mind. Clara laughed softly. Some days I did lose my mind, but children are patient learners mostly. They don't judge themselves as harshly as adults do. I ain't patient. I noticed. She gathered the slate and chalk. But you're determined. That counts for more. He helped her clean up their movements easy and coordinated. It struck Clara how quickly they'd fallen into rhythm, how natural it felt to work alongside him to share space and silence. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. What happened with the Rangers? Silas went still. Clara waited, giving him space. I killed a man, he said finally. Self-defense, but it didn't feel that way. He was younger than Vernon Harker even. Came at me with a knife, drunk and desperate. I reacted without thinking. His voice was flat, distant. He died in my arms, crying for his mama. Clara's heart clenched. I quit the Rangers the next day. Couldn't stomach it anymore, the violence, the constant judgment about who deserved to live and who deserved to die. Started drifting instead. Figured if I kept moving, I couldn't hurt anyone. You've been running from it ever since. Yeah. He looked at her, his eyes haunted. Does that change things? Knowing what I did. You defended yourself. I killed a boy barely older than Sarah. A boy who was trying to kill you. Clara touched his hand. You made a choice in a moment of crisis. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. I don't feel human most days. Then let us help you remember. The words hung between them heavy with meaning. Silas turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. His grip was warm, rough, desperate in a way that made Clara's breath catch. You're a good woman, Clara Sullivan. I'm a woman doing her best, same as everyone. No, not same as everyone. He raised their joined hands, pressed his lips to her knuckles. Not even close. Clara's pulse hammered in her throat. This was dangerous territory, emotional quicksand that could swallow them both. But she couldn't pull away. Didn't want to. Silas. I know. He released her hand gently. I know. Too fast. Too much. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just... She searched for words. Give me time. I've been alone a long time. I've learned to be afraid of wanting things. I got nothing but time. He stood reaching for his coat. And I ain't going anywhere. He left for his camp, and Clara sat alone at the table staring at the slate covered in crooked letters. Her hand still tingled where he'd kissed it. She was in trouble. Real trouble. The kind that had nothing to do with Harker, and everything to do with her own traitorous heart. But for once, trouble didn't feel like something to run from. It felt like something worth running toward. The days that followed established a pattern. Silas arrived at dawn, worked until dark, and left only when the children were settled for the night. He fixed the porch steps, reinforced the chicken coop, dug a new latrine farther from the well. Every problem Clara mentioned was addressed within hours. The children adapted to his presence with varying degrees of speed. Hannah and Benjamin attached themselves to him, immediately following him everywhere, begging for stories and attention. Samuel warmed slowly, watching from a distance, before gradually moving closer. Abigail peppered him with questions until he answered, then peppered him with more. Mary Grace remained wary. She watched Silas with her father's eyes, and Clara knew she was waiting for him to disappear like Ezra had. Thomas was the most complicated. He oscillated between suspicion and grudging respect, sometimes within the same hour. But the lessons Silas had promised teaching him to stand to project calm authority were bridging the gap. "It's in the eyes," Silas explained one afternoon, the two of them standing in the yard while Clara watched from the window. "You look at a man direct, don't blink, don't flinch. Let him know you see him, really see him. And that works. 9 times out of 10. Most bullies are counting on you to look away first. When you don't, it throws them off. What about the 10th time? The 10th time you better know how to fight." Silas shifted his stance. "But we ain't there yet. First we learn to not need fighting." Sarah watched these lessons too, her expression thoughtful. One evening she approached Silas while he was chopping wood. "I want to learn." Silas rested the axe. "Learn what you're teaching Thomas. How to stand, how to make people listen." She lifted her chin. "I'm the oldest. If something happens to Mama, I'm responsible for all of them. I should know how to protect them." "Something you expecting to happen to your Mama?" "Something already happened to my Papa." Sarah's voice was hard brittle. "I learned not to expect anything." Silas studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right. But what I teach Thomas ain't exactly what I'd teach you. Women got different tools, different strengths. You willing to learn that?" "I'm willing to learn anything that keeps my brothers and sisters safe." "Then we'll start tomorrow." Clara watched from the porch, her heart swelling. This man, this drifter, this stranger, was giving her children things she couldn't. Knowledge, confidence, the sense that they mattered. She was falling in love with him. The realization hit her like cold water. She gripped the porch railing, her knees suddenly weak. "Mama!" Abigail appeared beside her. "You okay? You look funny." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired." But she wasn't fine. She was terrified and thrilled and confused. She was a widow with 7 children. He was a drifter with ghosts. This couldn't work, shouldn't work. But when Silas looked up from his chopping and met her eyes across the yard, when his face softened into something almost like joy, Clara knew that whether it should work or not didn't matter. It already was. That night during their reading lesson, Clara made a decision. "I need to tell you something," she said. Silas looked up from the slate where he'd been practicing his letters. "What is it?" "I'm scared. Of Harker. Of you." He went very still. "Clara, not like that." She reached across the table, took his hand. "I'm scared of what I feel. I'm scared of wanting something I can't have. I'm scared of trusting again, because the last time I trusted someone, he died and left me alone with 7 children and nothing but my own hands to keep them alive. I'm not Ezra. I know you're not. But you could leave too. You could ride away tomorrow and never look back, and I'd survive because surviving is what I do. But the children—" Her voice broke. "They're already attached. They already see you as something permanent. And if you leave, I'm not leaving. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Silas stood, came around the table, knelt before her so their eyes were level. "Clara, I've been running for 24 years. Running from pain, from responsibility, from anything that might make me stay. And then I saw you outside that store, and something in me just stopped. Silas, I don't want to run anymore. I want to stay, here, with you, with these children who drive me crazy and make me remember what hope feels like." He took her face in his hands, gentle as morning. "I want to build something. I want to matter to someone. I want to wake up in the same place twice and not feel like I'm trapped. You can't know that. After a week." "I know it." His voice was fierce, certain. "I've never known anything so clearly in my life. I love you, Clara May Sullivan, and I love your children. And I'm asking, begging for you to let me stay." Clara's tears spilled over hot against her cheeks. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so desperately that it hurt. "And if you change your mind, I won't. But if you do, then I'll deserve whatever hell comes my way. But I won't. Clara." He wiped her tears with his thumbs. "I won't." She kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't considered. Just an impulse, a need that overwhelmed everything else. His lips were warm, slightly chapped, and he froze for just a moment before responding. His hands slid into her hair, tilting her head back, and Clara felt something inside her crack open. 2 years of loneliness. 2 years of fear and grief and grinding survival. All of it washed away in the taste of this man, this stranger who wasn't a stranger anymore. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Silas rested his forehead against hers. "Does this mean you'll let me stay?" Clara laughed through her tears. "Ask me properly." Clara May Sullivan. His voice was rough, trembling slightly. "Will you let me stay? Not just tonight, not just this winter, but permanently. As your husband, if you'll have me." "Yes." The word came out before she could second-guess it. "Yes, I'll have you." He kissed her again, softer this time, and Clara felt something she'd thought was dead come back to life. Hope. Real, dangerous, beautiful hope. Whatever came next, Harker's threats, the town's gossip, the hard work of blending 2 broken lives into one, they would face it together. And together, Clara was beginning to believe they might just survive. The storm came 3 days after the proposal. Clara woke to a sound she knew too well, wind howling like a wounded animal, rattling the cabin's walls with furious hands. She sat up in the darkness, her heart already racing. "Mama!" Sarah's voice came from across the room, thin with fear. "Mama, what's happening?" Blizzard. Clara threw off her blankets and moved to the window. Through the gaps in the rags, she could see nothing but white. "A bad one." The children stirred voices rising in confusion and alarm. Hannah started to cry. Benjamin asked if they were going to die. Thomas was already up pulling on his boots. "Everyone stay calm," Clara ordered. "Thomas, get the fire built up. Sarah, count heads. I need to know everyone's accounted for." "Silas," Thomas said suddenly. "He's still at the creek." Clara's blood went cold. The creek was half a mile away. In a storm like this, half a mile might as well be 100. "He knows weather," she said, forcing confidence into her voice. "He'll have found shelter." "But what if he didn't? What if he tried to come here and got lost?" "Thomas." Clara gripped her son's shoulders. "Silas Callahan has survived worse than this. He'll be fine." She didn't know if she believed it, but she needed Thomas to believe it, needed all of them to believe it, because panic would kill them faster than cold. The morning passed in tense waiting. Clara kept the children busy, feeding the fire, preparing food, playing quiet games to distract the little ones. But her eyes kept drifting to the door, her ears straining for any sound beyond the wind's roar. "Please," she prayed silently. "Please, let him be safe." Around midday, the door burst open. Silas stumbled through, coated in snow and ice, his face raw and red from the wind. He collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. "Silas!" Clara rushed to him, brushing snow from his coat. "You walked through that. Couldn't stay away." His teeth were chattering. "Knew you'd be worried?" "I was terrified." She helped him to the fire, stripping off his frozen coat. "You could have died." "Didn't, though." He managed a weak smile. "Takes more than a little snow to kill me." The children gathered around, their fear transforming to relief. Hannah climbed into Silas's lap before anyone could stop her, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "You came back," she said. "Course I did, little one. Told you I would." Clara watched them, her heart so full it hurt. This man had walked through a killing storm to reach them, had risked his life because he couldn't bear to leave them worried. "You're staying inside tonight," she said firmly. No arguments. "Yes, ma'am." Silas's eyes met hers, warm despite the cold that still clung to him. "Whatever you say." The storm raged for 2 days. They huddled together in the cabin, all 9 of them conserving heat and food. Silas told stories to pass the time, tales of Texas and New Mexico, of wild horses and wilder men. The children listened with rapt attention, even Sarah and Thomas forgetting their usual reservations. Clara found herself watching him constantly. The way he made Hannah giggle with silly voices. The way he answered Samuel's endless questions with patience. The way he included Mary Grace in conversations, gently drawing her out of her shell. On the second night, after the children were asleep, Clara and Silas sat together by the dying fire. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for being here, for everything. Don't thank me for doing what's right. I'll thank you for whatever I want." She leaned against his shoulder. "You could have stayed safe by the creek. You chose to come. Wasn't really a choice." His arm came around her. "Being away from you felt worse than any storm." Clara closed her eyes, letting herself feel safe for the first time in days. The wind still howled outside, but inside was warm, and she wasn't alone anymore. She was never going to be alone again. The storm broke on the third morning. Clara woke to silence, true silence, without the wind's constant screaming. Through the window she could see clear sky, painfully blue after days of gray. "It's over," she breathed. "Mama." Abigail's voice cut through the quiet. "Mama, something's wrong with Mary Grace." Clara's blood froze. She flew across the cabin to where her children slept, pushing past the others to reach Mary Grace's pallet. Her daughter was burning up. The fever had come sometime in the night, silent, vicious, deadly. Mary Grace lay still, her face flushed red, her breathing shallow and labored. When Clara touched her forehead, the heat nearly singed her hand. "No," Clara whispered. "No, no, no." "What is it?" Silas was beside her instantly. "What's wrong?" "Fever. A bad one." Clara's hands shook as she felt Mary Grace's pulse. "Too fast. Much too fast. I need cold water, rags, something to bring the temperature down." The next hours blurred into nightmare. Clara worked frantically, bathing Mary Grace with cold cloths, trying to force water between her cracked lips. The other children huddled together, silent and terrified, watching their sister fight for her life. Nothing helped. The fever climbed higher. "She needs medicine," Clara said, her voice breaking. "Real medicine. I don't have anything strong enough." "What kind of medicine?" "Willow bark tea, quinine if we can get it. Something to break the fever before it—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Jensen." Silas was already reaching for his coat. "Old Zeke keeps medicines, traded for them last fall." "That's 4 miles away. The snow—" "I'll make it." "Silas, you can't. The drifts will be chest high. The trails are buried. You could—" "I could what, die?" He cupped her face in his hands. "Clara, I watched my baby sister die of fever when I was 12. Watched her burn up while my mama cried and prayed and couldn't do a damn thing to save her. I won't let that happen again. Not to your daughter. Not while I got breath in my body. If something happens to you, then you'll survive. You always do. But I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure nothing happens." He kissed her forehead hard and desperate. "Keep her cool. Keep her hydrated. I'll be back before dark." He was gone before Clara could argue further. She watched through the window as he saddled his horse, the animal snorting and stamping in the deep snow. Watched as he mounted and kicked the horse into motion, plunging into drifts that nearly swallowed them both. Watched until he disappeared over the rise and she couldn't see him anymore. "He'll come back," Thomas said quietly, appearing at her side. "He always comes back." "I know." Clara's voice was hollow. "I know he does." But she didn't know. Not really. All she knew was that 2 people she loved were now fighting for their lives, one against fever, one against winter, and she was powerless to help either of them. The hours crawled past. Clara worked over Mary Grace without stopping. Changing the cooling cloths, dripping water into her mouth, talking to her constantly, even though she wasn't sure her daughter could hear. "Stay with me, baby. Stay with Mama. You're strong, Mary Grace. Stronger than you know. Don't you dare leave me." The other children helped where they could. Sarah took over the cooling cloths when Clara's hands cramped. Thomas kept the fire going, made sure there was always hot water ready. Abigail entertained the little ones, keeping them away from the sickbed. Even Hannah understood something was wrong. She sat in the corner, thumb in her mouth, eyes huge and frightened. "Is Mary going to heaven?" Benjamin asked at one point. "Like Papa?" "No." Clara's voice was fierce. "No, she's not. She's staying right here with us." "Please, God," she prayed silently. "Please don't take another one from me. I can't lose another one." The sun began to sink toward the mountains. Clara's hope sank with it. 4 miles through chest-high snow. Even for Silas, even with his determination, it might be impossible. He could be lost out there, frozen dead in a drift, while she sat here watching her daughter die. "Mama!" Sarah's voice was urgent. "Rider coming!" Clara flew to the window. A figure on horseback was cresting the rise, moving slowly but steadily through the snow. Even at this distance, she recognized the silhouette. Silas. She had the door open before he reached the yard. He half fell from the saddle, his face gray with exhaustion, his clothes crusted with ice. But in his hands, clutched against his chest like something precious, was a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "Got it," he gasped. "Willow bark. Quinine. Jensen had both." Clara grabbed the bundle and ran inside, not stopping to help him, not stopping for anything. She tore open the oilcloth and found the medicines, dried bark. A small bottle of bitter liquid, instructions scratched on a piece of paper in Jensen's crude handwriting. Her hands moved on instinct. Boiling water for the tea, measuring out the quinine, lifting Mary Grace's head, forcing the medicines past her lips. "Drink, baby. Please drink." Mary Grace swallowed weakly. Once, twice. Then fell back, still burning, still barely breathing. "How long?" Clara asked. Jensen said the fever should break within hours, if it's going to break at all. Silas had made it inside, was leaning against the wall, barely able to stand. He said sometimes it doesn't. It will." Clara stroked her daughter's hair. "It has to." The night that followed was the longest of Clara's life. She sat beside Mary Grace, never leaving, never sleeping. Silas sat with her for as long as he could, but exhaustion eventually claimed him, and he slept where he sat, slumped against the wall. The other children drifted off one by one until Clara was alone in the candlelight with her daughter. She talked through the darkness. Told Mary Grace stories about her father, about Boston, about the journey west. Told her about the life they were going to build, the garden, the animals, the new room Silas would build for the children. Told her about love and hope and all the things worth living for. "You have to see it," Clara whispered. "You have to be there. I can't do this without you, Mary Grace. You're part of us. You're part of this family. And families don't give up on each other." Sometime in the darkest hours, Mary Grace's breathing changed. Clara's heart stopped. She leaned closer, terrified of what she might find. But the breathing wasn't weaker. It was stronger, steadier. And when Clara touched her daughter's forehead, the skin was cooler than it had been in days. "Silas." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "Silas, wake up." He was alert instantly, years of survival instinct overriding exhaustion. "What is it? Is she?" "The fever's breaking." Silas crossed to the bed, felt Mary Grace's forehead for himself. His eyes closed briefly, and Clara saw his lips move in what might have been a prayer. "Thank God," he breathed. "Thank God." Clara finally let herself cry. The tears came without warning, without control, great racking sobs that shook her whole body. Silas pulled her into his arms and held her while she fell apart, his hands stroking her back, his voice murmuring comfort. "It's all right. She's all right. You saved her. You saved her." You rode through that storm. You could have died. But I didn't. And neither did she. That's all that matters. Clara clung to him, crying out all the fear and desperation of the past day. And when the tears finally stopped, when she pulled back and looked at this man who had risked everything for her daughter, she knew with absolute certainty that she loved him. Not because he was kind, not because he was strong, but because when her child was dying, he had walked into the storm without hesitation. That was love. Real love. The kind that didn't ask for anything in return. "Marry me," she said. Silas blinked. "I thought I already asked that." "You did, but I'm asking now. Properly." She took his face in her hands. "Silas Callahan, will you marry me?" His smile was tired but brilliant. "Yes, ma'am. I believe I will." Mary Grace woke the next morning weak but lucid, the fever truly broken. "Mama." Her voice was a thread. "I had bad dreams." "I know, baby." Clara smoothed her daughter's hair. "But they're over now. You're safe. I saw Papa. In the dreams." Mary Grace's eyes were solemn. "He said I should stay. He said you needed me." Clara's throat closed up. "He was right. I need you very much. He said there was someone new, someone good." Mary Grace looked toward Silas, who was helping Sarah prepare breakfast across the room. "Is that him? The good one?" "Yes, sweetheart. That's him. I like him. He feels safe." From Mary Grace, who trusted no one, this was everything. Clara kissed her daughter's forehead and let the tears come again, grateful ones this time. Healing ones. The recovery took time. Mary Grace was weak for days, sleeping more than waking, eating little. But each day she was stronger. Each day the color returned to her cheeks, the light to her eyes. And through it all, Silas was there. He carried Mary Grace when she wanted to see the snow outside. He told her stories when she couldn't sleep. He let her rest against his shoulder while Sarah read aloud from the Bible. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the wall that Mary Grace had built around herself began to crumble. "Mr. Silas," she asked one evening. "Yes, little one." "Are you going to be my new papa?" Silas looked at Clara, then back at Mary Grace. "If you'll have me, I'll have you." She said it simply, matter-of-factly, as only a child could. "But you can't die. My first papa died and it made everything sad. You have to promise not to die." "I can't promise that, sweetheart. Nobody can. But I can promise to try my hardest to stay with you as long as I can." "Is that enough?" Mary Grace considered this seriously. "Yes, I think so." "Then it's a deal." She held out her small hand, and Silas shook it gravely. Clara watched them, her heart overflowing. This man, this drifter, had somehow become the center of their world. And instead of feeling threatened, she felt complete. But trouble was coming. She could feel it the way she felt storms before they arrived. And sure enough, trouble came riding up the trail the very next week. Clara saw them first, 3 riders approaching from the direction of town. Her stomach clenched when she recognized the led horse. "Silas!" He looked up from the harness he was mending, saw the riders. His face went still. "Get the children inside." "I'm not hiding." "Clara, I said I'm not hiding." She lifted her chin. "Whatever he's got to say, he can say it to both of us." The riders pulled up in the yard. Harker was in front, as expected, his face twisted with ugly satisfaction. Behind him were Vernon and a man Clara didn't recognize, a stranger with a badge pinned to his coat. "Mrs. Sullivan," Harker said, "I told you I'd ask questions about your friend here. I got answers. And you brought the law to share them." Clara's voice was steady, despite her racing heart. "This is Marshal Tom Brackett, up from Helena." Harker gestured to the stranger. "He was real interested when I mentioned the name Silas Callahan." Clara looked at Silas. His expression was unreadable, but something in his stance had changed, a subtle tension, a readiness. "Marshal," Silas said, his voice neutral. "Callahan." The marshal's eyes were hard, assessing. "Been a long time." "You know each other?" "We do." Brackett shifted in his saddle. "Rode Rangers together back in the day, before Callahan here killed a boy in Abilene and ran." Clara's blood went cold. She looked at Silas, waiting for him to deny it. He didn't. "That's not the whole story," Silas said quietly. "Isn't it? The way I heard it, you shot down Billy Carson in cold blood. Kid was barely 18. Kid was drunk and trying to put a knife in my gut. I defended myself." "So you say, but you didn't stick around for a trial, did you? Just packed up and disappeared." Brackett leaned forward. "That looks guilty to me. I left because I couldn't stomach any more killing, not because I had something to hide." "Pretty words. Got any proof?" Silas was silent. "That's what I thought." Harker's voice oozed triumph. "So you see, Mrs. Sullivan, this man you've been harboring is a murderer, a fugitive from justice, and now that the marshal knows where he is, I'm not here to arrest him." Harker's head snapped toward Brackett. "What?" "I'm not here to arrest him." The marshal's voice was flat. "I looked into the Carson case before I rode up. Witnesses confirmed it was self-defense. The warrant was dropped years ago." Harker's face went purple. "Then why?" "Because you told me there was a dangerous criminal threatening a widow and her children. You made it sound like he was holding her hostage." Brackett's eyes swept the scene, Clara standing beside Silas, the children watching from the cabin doorway, none of them showing any fear of the man beside them. "That doesn't look like a hostage situation to me. She's been deceived, manipulated." "Have you, ma'am?" Brackett addressed Clara directly. "Has this man done anything to harm you or your children?" "No." Clara's voice rang clear. "He's done nothing but help us. He saved my daughter's life 3 days ago, rode through a blizzard to get medicine when she was dying of fever. And you're with him willingly. I'm engaged to marry him." Brackett nodded slowly, then turned back to Harker. "Sounds to me like you wasted my time, Mr. Harker. Dragged me 50 miles in the cold for nothing." "But he, the Carson boy, was a drunk who attacked a ranger with a knife. Callahan did what any lawman would do." Brackett gathered his reins. "My advice, let this go. Find someone else to bother. Because from where I'm sitting, the only one causing trouble here is you." He turned his horse and rode away without looking back. Harker sat frozen, his face contorted with rage. Vernon looked nervously between his father and Silas, his hand twitching toward his gun. "This isn't over," Harker hissed. "Yeah, it is." Silas stepped forward, his voice soft but dangerous. "You've tried twice now to drive me off. You've failed twice. There won't be a third time." "You threatening me?" "I'm telling you how it's going to be. Mrs. Sullivan and her children are under my protection. Anyone who tries to hurt them, anyone who spreads lies about them, anyone who makes their lives harder than they need to be, they'll answer to me." "You don't scare me." "Then you're not as smart as you think you are." The two men stared at each other. Clara held her breath, watching the tension crackle between them. Finally, Harker looked away. "This isn't over," he said again, but the words had lost their power. He yanked his horse's head around and kicked it into motion. Vernon followed, casting one last dark look over his shoulder. When they were gone, Silas's shoulders dropped. He reached up and removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "I should have told you," he said. "About Carson. About all of it." "You did tell me, that night by the fire." "Not everything, not the details." "I didn't need details." Clara moved to stand beside him. "I needed to know who you are, and I know that. A man who kills in self-defense isn't a murderer, he's a survivor." Silas looked at her, something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. "You still want to marry me? Even now?" even knowing the whole town will hear about this by nightfall." Clara took his face in her hands, the way she had the night she asked him to marry her. Silas Callahan. "I don't care what this town thinks. I don't care what Harker says. I don't care about anything except that you're here and you love my children, and you rode through a blizzard when my daughter was dying." She kissed him right there in the yard where anyone could see. "Now stop asking foolish questions and help me get supper started. We've got a wedding to plan." Silas laughed a real laugh, surprised and joyful. "Yes, ma'am. Whatever you say." They walked inside together, and the children surrounded them immediately, all talking at once. "Is the bad man gone? Are we safe? Can we still have the wedding?" "Yes," Clara said, gathering as many of them as she could reach into her arms. "Yes to all of it. We're safe. We're together. And we're going to be just fine." Over their heads she met Silas's eyes. He nodded once, a promise and a vow. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The wedding was set for the first Sunday in February. Clara hadn't wanted to wait, but Reverend Whitfield insisted on proper notice. "Give the town time to accept it," he'd said, his weathered face kind but practical. "Let the gossip die down. By the time you stand before God, people will have found something else to talk about." Clara doubted that. Jedediah Harker had been spreading poison ever since the marshal rode away. Every trip to town for supplies brought new whispers, new stares, new evidence of how thoroughly he'd turned the community against them. But she refused to care. She had Silas. She had her children. She had food in the pantry, and a roof that didn't leak, and hope burning steady in her chest. Everything else was noise. "Mama, hold still." Sarah tugged at the fabric she was pinning around Clara's waist. "I can't get the measurements right if you keep fidgeting." "I'm not fidgeting. You are. You're thinking about Mr. Silas and getting all twitchy." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I am not." "You are too." Abigail looked up from where she was sorting buttons. "Your face gets all soft and your eyes go funny. It's disgusting." "Disgusting," Hannah echoed, not understanding the word, but enjoying being part of the conversation. "That's enough from all of you." Clara tried to sound stern and failed completely. Sarah finished the pinning. "Abigail, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And Hannah, go see what your brothers are doing." "They're with Papa Silas." Hannah said the name naturally, now had been saying it for weeks. "He's teaching Thomas to shoot." Clara's heart stuttered. "He's what?" "Teaching Thomas to shoot. With the rifle." Thomas asked, and Papa Silas said yes if you said yes, but nobody asked you, so I don't know if you said yes or not. Clara was out the door before Hannah finished speaking. She found them behind the cabin, Silas standing with Thomas, the rifle propped against a fence post. They weren't shooting, just talking, Silas's hands moving as he explained something about stance and breathing. "Silas Callahan." Both of them turned. Thomas's face went pale. Silas had the grace to look sheepish. "Now, Clara, you're teaching my 11-year-old son to shoot?" he asked. "And out here knowing how to handle a gun is—" "He's 11. I was 8 when I learned." Silas's voice was gentle but firm. "And I know boys younger than Thomas who've had to defend their homes against wolves, against rustlers, against worse. I ain't saying he needs to shoot anyone. I'm saying he needs to know how, so if the time ever comes, he's prepared." Clara opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. She looked at Thomas. Really looked at him. At the determination in his young face, the set of his shoulders, the way he stood, like he was ready to protect something. He wasn't a little boy anymore. He was becoming a man, whether she was ready for it or not. "You should have asked me first," she said finally. "You're right. I should have. I'm sorry. And you." She turned to Thomas. "Going behind my back is not acceptable. If you want something, you ask, directly. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." Clara stood there, torn between maternal protectiveness and practical reality. Out here in this harsh land, children grew up fast. They had to. "Fine," she said at last. "You can learn. But not without supervision, and not until Silas says you're ready. And the first time you point that rifle at anything you shouldn't, lessons are over. Permanently." Thomas's face split into a grin. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mama." He threw his arms around her all gangly limbs and boyish enthusiasm, and Clara held him tight. Her son. Her firstborn boy. Growing up so fast. "Go on then," she said, releasing him. "But be careful." She watched them for a moment, Silas patiently correcting Thomas's grip, Thomas listening with an intensity he rarely showed for anything else, then went back inside. Sarah was waiting, pins still in hand. "Well, he can learn." "Really?" Sarah's eyebrows rose. "I thought you'd forbid it." "So did I." Clara resumed her position for the fitting. "But Silas was right. Out here, Thomas needs to know these things. I can't protect him from everything. You can't protect any of us from everything." Sarah's voice was quiet, mature beyond her years. "That's why we need him, Mama. Not just for you. For all of us." Clara reached out and touched her daughter's cheek. "When did you get so wise? Somewhere between Papa dying and you almost giving up." Sarah's eyes were serious. "I watched you, Mama. Those first months. I thought I was going to lose you too. You were there, but you weren't really there. Like a ghost wearing your face." Clara's throat tightened. "Sarah, Mr. Silas brought you back. Whatever happens, I'll always be grateful to him for that." They finished the fitting in silence, but it was a comfortable silence. The silence of two women who understood each other. The days leading up to the wedding passed quickly. Silas worked from dawn to dusk, finishing projects he'd started and beginning new ones. A proper chicken coop. A reinforced fence. A new door for the cabin with real hinges instead of leather straps. Every improvement was a promise, a declaration that he was staying, that this was his home now too. The children adapted to having him there with remarkable ease. Even Mary Grace, still recovering from her illness, had grown comfortable enough to sit beside him during meals. She didn't talk much, but she listened to his stories, and sometimes Clara caught her smiling. Samuel had become Silas's shadow, following him everywhere, asking endless questions about horses and weather and why the sky was blue. Silas answered every one with patience, never dismissing the boy's curiosity. Benjamin and Hannah simply accepted Silas as part of their world, the way children accepted sunshine and gravity. He was Papa Silas, and that was that. Only Sarah and Thomas maintained any distance, and even that was shrinking. Thomas's shooting lessons had opened something between him and Silas, a male bond that Clara couldn't quite understand but was grateful for. And Sarah, for all her wariness, had started asking Silas's advice on things. Small things at first. What to do about a sick chicken. Whether to use the last of the flour for bread or biscuits. They were becoming a family. Slowly, imperfectly, but unmistakably. 3 days before the wedding, Martha Chen appeared at the cabin door. Clara nearly dropped the bowl she was holding. Martha was the wife of James Chen, the Chinese carpenter who lived on the edge of town. Clara had seen her in passing, but never spoken to her. The woman kept to herself, and the town's prejudice against her husband extended to her as well. "Mrs. Chen, I didn't expect, please come in." Martha stepped inside, her eyes taking in the cabin's modest interior with quick assessment. She was small, barely 5 feet, with dark hair pulled back severely, and hands that showed years of hard work. "I heard you're getting married," she said without preamble. "To the drifter." "His name is Silas Callahan. And yes, I am." "The town's talking." "The town's always talking." Martha's mouth quirked in something that might have been a smile. "True enough. They talk about us too. About me and James. Say we shouldn't be allowed. Say our marriage isn't real because he's Chinese and I'm not." Clara felt a flash of anger on Martha's behalf. "That's ignorant and cruel." "It is." Martha reached into the basket she carried and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. "I brought you this, for your wedding." Clara unwrapped the cloth carefully. Inside was a beautiful piece of embroidery, delicate flowers, and birds worked in silk thread, the kind of craftsmanship that must have taken months. "It's for your table," Martha said, "or wherever you want. My mother made it for my wedding. She said it brings good fortune." "Mrs. Chen, I can't accept this. It's too precious." "You can and you will." Martha's voice was firm. "You're like me now, Mrs. Sullivan. An outsider. Someone the town has decided to hate." She paused. "Outsiders need to stick together." Clara looked at this woman she'd never really seen before, this stranger who'd walked through cold and prejudice to bring her a gift. "Thank you," she said softly. "Would you come to the wedding, I mean? You and your husband. It would mean a great deal to us." Martha's eyes widened slightly. "You want us there?" "I do. Very much." For a moment, Martha's careful composure cracked, and Clara saw the loneliness underneath. The longing to belong somewhere to someone. "We'll come," Martha said. "Thank you." After she left, Clara stood holding the embroidery, thinking about the strange ways that people found each other. Two women with nothing in common, except being outcasts. Now allies, maybe even friends. The night before the wedding, Silas found Clara sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket against the cold. "Can't sleep?" he asked, settling beside her. "Too much thinking." "Thinking about what?" Clara was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts. "About Ezra. About the day I married him. I was so young, Silas, 18 years old, and certain I knew everything. Certain that love was enough to make anything work. Was it? For a while. We had good years before the children came so fast and the money got so tight. Before the West broke us down." She pulled the blanket tighter. "I loved him. I did. But I don't know if I ever really knew him. We were so busy surviving, we forgot to actually live." Silas took her hand, his warmth cutting through the cold. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm trying to say that I'm scared." Clara turned to face him. "Not of marrying you. Of making the same mistakes. Of losing myself again in survival mode and forgetting to pay attention to what matters." "Then we won't let that happen." "How?" "By paying attention." His eyes were steady, serious. "By talking to each other even when it's hard. By remembering that this family we're building is more important than any homestead or harvest or amount of money." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I've been alone a long time, Clara. I know what it's like to lose yourself in just getting through each day. I don't want that for us." "Neither do I." "Then we're agreed." He kissed her knuckles. "We pay attention, we talk. We don't let the hard times make us forget why we're doing this in the first place." Clara leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. "I love you, Silas Callahan." "I love you too, Clara May Sullivan, soon to be Callahan." He pressed his lips to her hair. "You ready for tomorrow?" "More ready than I've ever been for anything." They sat together in the cold dark, watching stars wheel overhead, and Clara felt the last of her fear dissolve. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The wedding morning dawned clear and bright. Clara woke to find Sarah already up heating water for washing. The other children stirred around her, sleepy and excited, all of them aware that something important was happening. "You need to wash your hair, Mama," Sarah announced, "and your face, and put on the dress. Reverend Whitfield will be here at noon." "I know what time the Reverend will be here." "Then you know you're running late." Clara laughed, surprised by it. Here she was on her wedding day being bossed around by her 13-year-old daughter. It felt right somehow, normal in all the ways that mattered. She washed and dressed with the children's help, Sarah handling the delicate work, while Abigail offered unsolicited commentary, and the younger ones watched with wide eyes. The dress was simple blue cotton, carefully mended and cleaned, but Sarah had added new trim around the collar, and Abigail had found wildflowers somehow already pressing them into Clara's damp hair. "You look beautiful, Mama," Mary Grace said softly. It was the most she'd spoken in days. Clara crouched down to her daughter's level. "Thank you, sweetheart. Do you feel all right, strong enough for today?" Mary Grace nodded. I want to see you get married. I want to see you be happy. I am happy. I'm happy right now with all of you. But you'll be happier with Papa Silas. I'll be happiest with all of you and Papa Silas. Together. That's what family means. Mary Grace considered this, then nodded again. Okay, that makes sense. The Reverend arrived at noon as promised with his wife as witness. Behind them came old Zeke Jensen riding a mule and grinning his gap-toothed grin. And behind him, to Clara's joy, came James and Martha Chen, dressed in their best-looking nervous but determined. Quite a gathering, Reverend Whitfield observed. More than I expected given the circumstances. Quality over quantity, Clara said. These are the people who matter. Silas was waiting by the cabin door, wearing a clean shirt and his best vest. His hair was combed, his face freshly shaved, and when he saw Clara in her blue dress with flowers in her hair, his expression transformed into something so tender it made her breath catch. You're beautiful, he said. You're not so bad yourself. Ready. I've been ready for weeks. You're the one who made me wait. He laughed and offered his arm, and together they walked to where Reverend Whitfield waited. The ceremony was simple. No church, no congregation, no organ music or fancy decorations. Just two people standing in a snowy yard surrounded by 7 children and a handful of friends who'd chosen to be there despite what the town thought. But when Reverend Whitfield asked Clara if she took this man, her voice rang out clear and strong. I do. And when he asked Silas the same question, his answer was equally certain. I do. Silas slid a ring onto Clara's finger, a simple band of silver worn smooth with age. It was my mother's, he said quietly. Jensen kept it for me all these years. I'd like you to have it. Clara looked at the ring, this symbol of another woman's love story now passed on to her. I'll treasure it. By the power vested in me, Reverend Whitfield intoned. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Silas kissed her gentle and reverent, and the children erupted into cheers. You're married, Benjamin shouted, bouncing with excitement. You're married! You're married! Does this mean we have a papa for real now? Hannah asked. For real, Silas confirmed, scooping her up. For real and forever. They celebrated with food and laughter crowded into the cabin that suddenly felt too small and absolutely perfect. Jensen had brought whiskey for the adults and peppermints for the children. Martha Chen had made dumplings her family's traditional celebration food, and the children declared them the best thing they'd ever tasted. As the afternoon wore on and the celebration wound down, Clara found herself standing at the window watching the guests depart. Jensen rode away on his mule waving. The Chens followed Martha, looking back once with something like joy on her guarded face. Reverend Whitfield paused at the door. You've got a good man there, Mrs. Callahan. Mrs. Callahan. The name sent a thrill through her. I know, she said. Thank you for everything. Thank me by being happy. That's all the thanks I need. When they were finally alone, or as alone as they could be with 7 children, Silas pulled Clara close. Hello, wife. Hello, husband. Strange words. Good words. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I never thought I'd say them again. Never thought I'd want to. And now I can't imagine not saying them. Can't imagine you not being here. She looked up at him. You're part of us now, Silas. Part of this family. You belong here. I know. His voice was rough with emotion. First time in my life I've belonged anywhere. It's a lot to take in. Take your time. We've got plenty of it. We do, don't we? He smiled, and it reached all the way to his eyes. We've got forever. That night, after the children were settled, Clara and Silas sat together by the fire. The cabin was quiet, the only sounds the crackling flames and the soft breathing of sleeping children. What are you thinking about? Clara asked. About how different things are. A month ago, I was drifting. No home, no purpose, no reason to stay anywhere longer than it took to earn my next meal. He stared into the flames. Now I've got a wife, 7 children, a place that needs me. Does it scare you? Terrifies me. He turned to look at her, but in a good way. The kind of scared that means something matters, that there's something worth protecting. I felt that way when each of my children was born, terrified and joyful and overwhelmed all at once. That's exactly it. He took her hand. I spent so long running from anything that could hurt me. Figured if I never stayed, I'd never have anything to lose. But the truth is, I was already lost. Just didn't know it. And now I'm found. He lifted her hand to his lips. You found me, Clara. You and those 7 beautiful, maddening, wonderful children. You gave me something I didn't even know I was looking for. Clara's eyes burned. Silas, let me finish. I need to say this. He took a breath. I know I'm not their real father. I know I can never replace Ezra, and I wouldn't want to. But I swear to you, here and now, I will love them like they're mine. I will protect them with everything I have. I will be there for every scraped knee and bad dream and broken heart. And when they're grown, when they leave to build their own lives, I will be proud of them, proud to have been part of their story. Clara couldn't speak, could barely breathe. And you. Silas cupped her face in his hands. I will love you until my last breath. I will work beside you, struggle beside you, celebrate beside you. I will be your partner in everything. And when times get hard, because they will, that's just how life is. I will not run. I will not leave. I will stand with you always. That's my vow. Not just for today, but for every day that comes after. Clara kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. The gratitude, the love, the fierce hope for the future they would build together. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you too, now and forever. They stayed by the fire until it burned to embers, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to the quiet sounds of their family sleeping. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Harker's resentment hadn't disappeared with the wedding, and the hard work of surviving in this harsh land never stopped. But tonight, Clara let herself simply be happy. She was married. She was loved. She was home. Spring came slowly to Bitter Creek. First, the snow softened, losing its killing edge. Then the creek began to move beneath its ice whispers of water, finding their way through frozen banks. And finally, one morning in early March, Clara woke to the sound of birdsong. Mama! Benjamin burst through the door, his face bright with wonder. The birds came back. The birds came back. Clara stepped onto the porch, Silas beside her, and watched the valley come alive. Green was pushing through the brown and white, tentative but determined. The air smelled different, warmer, wetter, full of promise. Time to start planning the garden, Silas said. Already, Clara laughed. The ground's barely thawed. Exactly. Need to get the plans sorted before the ground's ready. Otherwise, we'll be behind before we start. He pulled a worn piece of paper from his pocket, covered in sketches and notes. Clara recognized the handwriting, her own, mixed with Silas's careful block letters. They'd been working on his reading and writing all winter, and his progress had been remarkable. Corn here along the south fence, Silas said, pointing to the sketch. Beans beside it, they'll climb the stalks. Squash in between to shade the roots. It's called the Three Sisters. Old Zeke taught me. Said the native folks been doing it for centuries. And potatoes. North side where the ground stays cooler. Carrots too, and turnips. Silas looked up, his blue eyes bright with enthusiasm. Clara, if we do this right, we'll have enough to feed all of us through next winter, and still have surplus to trade. Surplus. Clara rolled the word around in her mouth. I can't remember the last time we had surplus of anything. Get used to it. Silas pulled her close, kissing her forehead. This is our year. I can feel it. She wanted to believe him. After everything they'd survived, the hunger, the storms, Mary Grace's illness, Harker's persecution. She wanted to believe that the hard times were behind them. But Clara had learned not to trust good fortune. It always seemed to come with a price. The price came calling 3 days later. Clara was alone in the cabin when she heard the horses. Silas had taken Thomas and Samuel to check the fence lines, and Sarah had the younger children down by the creek looking for the first spring wildflowers. 3 riders. Vernon Harker in front, flanked by 2 men Clara didn't recognize. Hired hands from the look of them. Hard-faced men with guns on their hips. Clara's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady as she stepped onto the porch. "Mr. Harker, your father send you—" Vernon's smile was ugly. "My father don't know I'm here. This is personal." "Personal? You made a fool of him. That drifter of yours made a fool of him. The whole town's been laughing behind his back for months." Vernon leaned forward in his saddle. "Someone needs to pay for that. And you think that someone is me. I think that someone is whoever's convenient." Vernon gestured to his men. "Search the property. Take whatever's valuable. When her husband gets back, we'll have a conversation about respect." The men dismounted, moving toward the cabin. Clara stepped in front of the door. "You're not coming in here. Lady, get out of the way. We ain't going to hurt you, just taking what's owed." "Nothing here is owed to anyone. This is my home. You have no right." One of the men reached for her arm. Clara pulled the knife from her apron pocket. The one Silas had given her insisted she carry everywhere, and pressed it against the man's wrist. "Touch me again, and you'll lose this hand." The man froze. Vernon laughed, but there was uncertainty in it now. "You think a little knife scares us? I think you're 3 men threatening a woman alone on her property. I think if my husband comes back and finds you here, there won't be enough left of you to bury." Clara's voice was ice. "I think you're a coward, Vernon Harker, just like your father, and I think you should leave while you still can." "Why you?" "Vernon." The voice came from behind them. All 3 men spun. Silas sat on his horse at the edge of the yard, rifle resting easy across his saddle. Thomas was beside him, his own rifle, the one Silas had taught him to use, pointed steady at Vernon's chest. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Silas said pleasantly. "Something I can help you with?" Vernon's face had gone pale. He looked between Silas and Thomas, calculating odds. "This ain't your business, Callahan. Everything that happens on this property is my business. These are my people. This is my home." Silas's voice hadn't changed, still pleasant, still calm, but something in his eyes had gone cold. "You want to threaten my wife? You want to steal from my family? You go right ahead and try. But understand what happens next." "What happens next?" "I kill you, right here, right now, and bury you where no one will ever find you." Silas smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Self-defense, they'll call it. 3 armed men against 1 woman. Any jury in the territory would acquit me, if they even bothered with a trial." Vernon's hands were shaking now. The 2 hired men exchanged nervous looks. "This ain't over," Vernon said. "Yeah, it is." Silas urged his horse forward, slow and deliberate. "I'm going to tell you something, Vernon, and I want you to listen real careful. I know men like you. Met plenty of them over the years. Men who think they're tough because they pick on folks who can't fight back. Men who run in packs because they're too scared to stand alone." He stopped his horse inches from Vernon's. "You ain't tough. You ain't even interesting. You're just a bully with a famous daddy and too much time on your hands. And bullies, in my experience, tend to come to bad ends. You threatening me, I'm educating you. There's a difference." Silas leaned forward. "Go home, Vernon. Tell your daddy this is over. Tell him the Callahans are here to stay, and any further attempts to intimidate us will be met with appropriate force. Tell him I've written a letter to Marshal Brackett, detailing every threat, every visit, every attempt at harassment. If anything happens to me or my family, that letter goes public. And your daddy's reputation, his precious standing in this community, goes with it." Vernon's face twisted with rage, but beneath it, Clara could see fear. Real fear, the kind that came from meeting something you couldn't bully or buy. "You'll regret this," he spat. "Maybe, but you'll regret it more." Silas straightened. "Now get off my property, and don't come back." Vernon wheeled his horse and kicked it into a gallop, his hired men scrambling to follow. They disappeared over the rise, and the yard fell silent. Clara's knife clattered from her shaking hands. Silas was off his horse in an instant, pulling her into his arms. "You're all right. You're all right. I've got you." "I was so scared." The words came out broken. "I tried to be brave, but I was so scared." "You were brave. You were magnificent." He held her tighter. Standing there with nothing but a knife facing down 3 armed men. That took guts, Clara. More guts than most men have. "I didn't know what else to do." "You did exactly right." Silas pulled back, looking into her eyes. "I'm sorry I wasn't here. I should have been here." "You can't be everywhere at once." "I can try." His jaw set hard. "This ends today. I'm riding into town. I'm going to have a conversation with Jedediah Harker that he won't forget." "Silas, no. Silas. He'll listen. Because I'm not going to threaten him. I'm not going to touch him. I'm going to do something much worse." Silas's smile was thin and sharp. "I'm going to beat him at his own game." He rode out an hour later, leaving Thomas in charge with strict instructions. Clara spent the afternoon in anxious waiting, jumping at every sound, certain that something terrible was about to happen. But when Silas returned at dusk, he was smiling. Really smiling, with genuine satisfaction. "What happened?" Clara demanded. "Had a talk with Harker. In his store in front of his customers. Very public, very calm." Silas dismounted and stretched. "Told him I knew about the unpaid debts he's been collecting. The ones where he charges triple interest and threatens people with sheriff involvement if they complain. Turns out Jensen's been keeping records for years, waiting for someone to put them to use. You blackmailed him." "I informed him that his business practices might interest the territorial authorities, and that if anything happened to us, anything at all, those records would find their way to Helena faster than he could say foreclosure." Silas pulled Clara close. "He's done, Clara. He won't bother us again. He can't afford to." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." The look on his face when he realized what I had on him. Silas shook his head. "That man's been bullying this town for years because nobody stood up to him. Well, somebody finally did. And it wasn't with fists or guns. It was with evidence and witnesses." Clara leaned against him, feeling the tension drain from her body. "It's really over. It's really over." And this time, she believed him. The spring that followed was the best of Clara's life. With Harker neutralized, the town's attitude shifted. People who'd whispered behind her back now nodded politely. The general store, now run by Harker's son Wesley, who was nothing like his father, extended credit without questions. Even Reverend Whitfield commented on the change during Sunday service. "Amazing what happens when fear lifts from a community," he observed. "People remember how to be decent." The garden flourished. Silas's 3 sisters' planting worked exactly as promised, the corn and beans and squash supporting each other in ways that seemed almost magical. Clara added herbs and flowers, creating a kitchen garden that provided both food and beauty. The children thrived too. Thomas shot up 3 inches in as many months, his voice cracking and deepening as he stumbled toward manhood. Sarah became Clara's right hand, managing the household with quiet efficiency. The younger ones grew strong and brown from days spent outside, their laughter filling the valley. And through it all, Silas was there, working beside them, teaching them, loving them. Clara often caught herself watching him, the way he ruffled Benjamin's hair, the patient attention he gave to Samuel's endless questions, the gentle way he drew Mary Grace out of her shell. He'd become father to them all, not by replacing Ezra, but by earning his own place in their hearts. "You're staring again," Silas said one evening, catching her eye across the supper table. "I'm admiring." "Same thing." "It's really not." Clara reached across and took his hand. I'm admiring the life we've built, the family we've become. I never thought I'd have this again. Have what? Happiness. The word came out simple and true. Real happiness. The kind that doesn't depend on circumstances or money or what other people think. Just being together, being us. Silas brought her hand to his lips. I didn't think I'd ever have it at all. Spent so many years convinced I didn't deserve it. And now I think maybe nobody deserves anything. We just get what we get and make the best of it. And somehow, against all odds, I got you. His eyes were soft. Best stroke of luck in my whole life seeing you outside that store. Lucky for both of us. Yeah, he smiled. Lucky for both of us. In late May, Clara realized she'd missed her monthly courses. Twice. She didn't say anything at first. Couldn't quite believe it. She was 34, had given birth 7 times already, and hadn't expected to conceive again. But as the weeks passed and the signs became undeniable, she had to accept the truth. She was pregnant. The question was how to tell Silas. She chose a quiet evening after the children were settled. They sat on the porch watching fireflies dance over the meadow, and Clara gathered her courage. I need to tell you something. Silas turned his expression immediately alert. What is it? Something wrong? No, nothing wrong. Clara took a deep breath. I'm going to have a baby. Silas went very still. For a long moment he didn't speak, didn't move, barely seemed to breathe. A baby, he said finally. Our baby. Our baby. His face transformed. Joy broke across it, like sunrise, brilliant and overwhelming. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. Clara. Clara. He said her name like a prayer. Are you sure? I'm sure. Probably 4 months along already, due in the fall. A baby. He pulled back, his eyes wet. I never thought I gave up hoping. He couldn't finish. I know. Clara touched his face. I know. Silas pressed his hand to her still flat belly, his touch reverent. Hello, little one. I'm your pa. I'm going to be your pa. You're already a pa to 7. This is different. He shook his head, struggling for words. Not more important. I love those children like my own blood, you know I do. But this one is ours, yours and mine. Something we made together. Are you happy? Happy? He laughed, but there were tears on his cheeks. Clara, I'm so happy I don't have words for it. I'm scared and overwhelmed and happier than I've ever been in my life. They sat together on the porch, Silas's hand on her belly, watching the fireflies and talking about the future. Names they liked. Whether they wanted a boy or a girl. How the children would react. They'll be excited, Clara predicted. Hannah's been asking for a baby for months. Thomas might be complicated. Thomas is always complicated, but he'll come around. Clara leaned against Silas's shoulder. They all will, because they love you, and they'll love this baby too. Our baby. Our baby. They told the children the next morning. Clara had been right. The excitement was immediate and overwhelming. A baby! Hannah shrieked, bouncing around the cabin. A real baby! Can I hold it? Can I name it? Can it sleep in my bed? The baby will have its own bed, Clara said, laughing, and we'll all help name it. I want to call it Buttercup, Benjamin announced. That's a cow's name, Abigail objected. We should call it something strong, like thunder or avalanche. We're not naming the baby Avalanche, Thomas said, but he was smiling. How about something normal, like William or Elizabeth? Those are boring, Samuel protested. What about something interesting, like Prometheus? What's a Prometheus? Mary Grace asked quietly. It's a Greek myth, a man who brought fire to humanity. Samuel's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. We learned about it in Mama's lessons. He was a hero. I like heroes. Mary Grace said. Maybe we could name the baby after a hero. Or a heroine, Sarah added. She'd been quiet through the chaos, but now she looked at Clara with something deep and knowing in her eyes. What do you think, Mama? Clara looked around at her family. 7 children she'd carried, and raised one man who'd become their father through choice and love and a new life growing inside her. I think we'll know the right name when we see them, she said. I think the name will find us. That's what you said when you named me, Mary Grace remembered. You said I looked like Grace when I was born, like something beautiful and unexpected. You were. You still are. Clara pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair. This child who'd nearly died in her arms, now healthy and growing and full of life. Everything's going to be different now, Mary Grace said softly. Different isn't always bad. I know. Mary Grace looked at Silas, then back at Clara. I like different. Different brought us Papa Silas. Different made us a family again. Clara's throat tightened. Yes, it did. The summer passed in golden haze. The garden produced abundantly enough to eat, fresh enough to preserve, enough to trade for things they needed. Silas took on occasional work at neighboring ranches, building their savings slowly but steadily. The children grew and learned and played. And Clara grew too, her belly swelling with new life. She'd forgotten how it felt being pregnant. The exhaustion and the aches, yes, but also the wonder. The first fluttering kicks. The way her hand kept drifting to her stomach, cradling the life inside. Silas was attentive to the point of hovering. He took over her heavier chores without being asked, made sure she rested during the hottest parts of the day, brought her wildflowers and berries whenever he found them. You're spoiling me, Clara told him. You're carrying my child. I'm allowed to spoil you. You're allowed to let me breathe. He laughed, backing off slightly, but his eyes never stopped watching her, full of wonder and worry and love. The baby came in early October, on a night when the harvest moon hung low and orange over the valley. Clara's labor started after supper, mild at first, then building in waves. Silas sent Thomas riding for old Zeke's wife, who served as midwife for the scattered homesteads. Sarah took charge of the younger children, keeping them calm and occupied. The hours passed. The pains intensified. Clara gripped Silas's hand and pushed when it was time to push, and somewhere in the darkness between midnight and dawn, a new cry split the air. A girl, Mrs. Jensen announced, her weathered face beaming. A perfect, healthy girl. Silas made a sound that might have been a sob. Clara held out her arms, and the midwife placed the baby in them, tiny, red-faced, furious at being born. Hello, little one, Clara whispered. Welcome to the world. She's beautiful. Silas's voice was wrecked. Clara, she's so beautiful. She looks like you. She looks like a tomato. Clara laughed, exhausted and elated. Give her time. She'll look like something eventually. The children came in one by one, each of them meeting their new sister with varying degrees of awe. Hannah wanted to hold her immediately. Benjamin asked if she could play catch yet. Samuel studied her with scientific curiosity. Abigail declared her acceptable. Mary Grace simply stood beside the bed, staring with wide eyes. Sarah hung back until the others had had their turn. Then she approached slowly, her expression unreadable. What do you think? Clara asked. Sarah looked at the baby, looked at Silas, looked at Clara. I think, she said carefully, that we're a real family now. All of us together, no matter where we came from or how we got here. We were always a real family. I know, but this makes it official. Sarah smiled, and for a moment she looked like the carefree girl she'd been before loss and hardship stole her childhood. Can I hold her? Clara transferred the baby to Sarah's arms. Her eldest daughter cradled her youngest sibling with practiced ease, looking down at the tiny face. What's her name? Clara looked at Silas. They'd discussed it, debated, it couldn't quite decide, but now looking at her family gathered around, she knew. Hope, she said. Her name is Hope. Like the creek, Thomas said. Like the feeling. Clara corrected. Because that's what she represents. What all of you represent. Hope for the future. Hope for better days. Hope that no matter how hard things get, there's always something worth fighting for. Silas knelt beside the bed, his hand finding Clara's. Hope Callahan. I like it. So do I, Sarah said softly. Hello, Hope. I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything. The baby yawned, unimpressed by the weight of her name, and the room erupted in quiet laughter. Later, after the children had been shooed to bed, and Mrs. Jensen had departed with promises to return tomorrow, Clara and Silas sat together, their daughter asleep between them. Thank you, Silas said. For what? For everything. For trusting me that day in town, for letting me stay, for this. He gestured at the baby, the cabin, the life they'd built. For all of it. You're the one who stopped, Clara reminded him. You're the one who saw a starving woman and decided to help. You're the one who chose us. Best choice I ever made. Mine too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter sleep. Outside, the moon had set, and the sky was starting to lighten toward dawn. What are you thinking? Clara asked. I'm thinking about the day we met. How you looked standing outside that store. So desperate, but so proud. I knew right then that you were someone special. You couldn't have known that. I felt it. Silas touched her face, gentle as always. I felt like I was supposed to find you. Like everything I'd been through, all the drifting and running and being alone, was just preparation for that moment. For you. Clara's eyes burned. Silas. I love you, Clara May Callahan. I love you, and I love our children, all 8 of them now, and I love this life we've built. His voice was rough with emotion. I know it hasn't been easy. I know there's hard times ahead, there always are. But I also know that as long as we're together, we can face anything. Together, Clara agreed. Always together. She leaned against him, watching their daughter sleep, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The hunger and fear. The stranger who'd appeared from nowhere with an offer of help. The slow building of trust, then love. The battles fought and won. The family they'd become. 8 children now. A home that didn't leak. A garden full of food. A husband who loved her completely. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was hers, and it was real, and it was more than she'd ever dared to hope for. Hope. That was what Silas had given her that cold December day outside Harker's store. Not just food or shelter or protection. Hope. The belief that things could be better. That she was worth helping. That even in the darkest times, there were people willing to reach out a hand. And now she was passing that hope on to her daughter, to all her children, to this family that had been built from broken pieces and stubborn love. We did good, Clara whispered. We did. Silas pressed a kiss to her hair. We did real good. Outside, the first birds were starting to sing. A new day was dawning, full of promise and possibility. Clara May Callahan held her daughter close, leaned against the man she loved, and smiled. They had found each other in the darkest winter, and together they had built something that would last. A home, a family, a future, and that she knew now was everything.